4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Hello, my name is Jack McGolrick, and today I'm going to be talking about pandemic insurance in the sports world. So, the outbreak. So this was the first real sign of things getting serious with the pandemic. And, obviously sporting events aren't going to help contribute to the spread of the disease, just, being that games are fans in such a compact space and all the players having to come into the arena or stadium, not practicing social distancing in any way. And so, also along with that, the teams are just frequently traveling, staying in different hotels, all that, not good. But so, I don't know about you, but for me, when things really started getting serious was on March 11th when I heard that NBA player Rudy Gobert was diagnosed with COVID-19. And they postponed the NBA about 30 or 45 minutes immediately after that. And then in the coming days, all other leagues and sports around the world, the vast majority of them postponed all of their events in the upcoming months. And so this was a big financial burden for all of these companies, unless they have a guaranteed compensation for a specified loss, aka insurance. And so Wimbledon was actually one of the few sporting events, one of the big tennis majors in England, that actually had filed for or had a policy for pandemic insurance. And so, following its cancellation, all England lawn tennis club's chief executive, Richard Lewis, announced that we're fortunate to have this insurance and that the insurers, the brokers, and everyone involved have been excellent with the work so far. And Wimbledon actually took this policy out in 2003 after the SARS pandemic, which I guess was a respiratory disease. I don't remember it, obviously. I was 5, but that was a respiratory disease around China that I guess was also an epidemic. Didn't get to this big of a scale. But after that happened, they knew we should be protecting ourselves from this. And it's estimated that over the 17 years that they've had the policy out, Wimbledon has paid nearly $32 million in premiums for this policy. But they'll be receiving well over $100 million, $142 million for their insurance claim. And so that's quite a profit for their policy. See, they were smart to take this risk into account. Okay, so losses faced by other sports organizations. In the NBA, there's an estimated league-wide loss based on ticket sales alone of $690 million. So if you take concession, alcohol sales at the game, jersey sales, just the general amount of fans that a team is losing from this being postponed, television, income from things being televised, all sources of revenue, if you take all that into consideration, it's like impossible to quantify how big these losses really are for these big leagues and teams. And so that's why leagues like the NBA and the NFL might want to seek out policies going forward that will protect them. It's too late, of course, to file for a policy now and, get your claim based off of COVID-19 now that we know about the outbreak. But going forward, they're going to want to take into consideration that, you really never know what's going to happen. And I don't think any of us saw this coming, but you need to know that that's a present risk. And even if they can't just cover their entire league from pandemics, they might want to consider, the marquee events like the Super Bowl or the NBA Finals with the amount of money that brings in. In some athletic associations, another thing to take into consideration is that smaller scale sports that are less popular, like combat sports or most women's sports, they pay less comparatively. So a lot of these athletes are waiting for their paycheck to pay their rent or their mortgage or for their children, and they need this money now more so than these millionaire athletes. So, we really want to get things back up and running as soon as possible in some way or another. Oops. Okay, so talking about the risk management panel for UGA on coronavirus. So the question that I posed to ask all the graduates at the panel was about will worker productivity decrease as employees are transitioning, just from the workplace to having to work from home. They're now just sitting on their at their kitchen table or coffee table, and there's no boss there telling them, pick up the pace, making sure they meet their quotas, this and that. So will will that present a problem? And Steve Gerard, the regional president at Markel, he's actually from Richmond, Virginia, where I live. He brought up that although, it's a big change, he thinks that things are more efficient now. Quote, I haven't had the distraction of sitting in airports, taking Ubers, spends less time traveling, really wasting his time if he can get it home from his house. And switching to the online workplace can be good, but it's really hard for, sports and things like that to try and transition and change the way that they do things because it's all centered around the sporting event, which, the fans go to, and there's press, the teams, coaches, everybody. So my question is, do you think that they should try to find a way to continue while meeting social distancing protocol, or should they just wait for things to pass? So what's next? Will the pandemic last long enough that the league will have to postpone or even cancel sports upcoming in the fall? I sure hope not. I hope the Dogs are playing in the fall come week 3 at Alabama. But, if they have to push it back, at least hopefully they can get it done at some point. And leagues may want to consider hosting events, without fans because they can still televise it and keep the fans engaged and involved and constantly moderate the players' and coaches' health. And although they would still be losing their ticket revenue, they would be able to make a good bit of it back by having their games still televised. And most importantly, just keep the fans happy that their team is playing. Most organizations are going to need to learn from this, though, going forward. This is a risk that's there, and they can lose nearly all of their revenue. So they need to be insured, I think. And so to wrap up, I have a quote from George Ellis. It is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. You should always be protected if there's a possibility of risk. And you'd rather, pay a small premium and take a small